So last year, Zach read 13 Stories by Jonathan Sims, and he recommended it to me. So I put it in my TBR, and I'm piling through this TBR, and I got to this book, and well, Zach was right. I had a lot of fun with this story.
Yes!
Ah!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son sit down and talk about fantasy, sci-fi, sometimes a little bit of paranormal stuff, but mostly books. I'm the son of that equation, Zach.
And I'm the father, Jim. Great to have you with us here today as we take a little time to talk about this book, 13 Stories, that we've both read and are excited to talk to each other about and share with you. If you enjoy what you see today, don't forget to hit that like button down below and subscribe. It is so important to us. It helps everybody else find out we're here and enjoy our fun.
Plus, it just makes me a little happy.
Just who doesn't want to make Zach a little happy?
A lot of people, actually.
Do it. So, good morning, Zach. We're getting together here on a Saturday morning. You're in Central Time. I'm in Pacific, so it's a little earlier for me.
True.
I'm enjoying some coffee today in our nice merch mug.
I am not. I'm drinkless for the moment. Between things.
That's sad. Drinkless. I feel bad for you.
I mean, when it comes down to it, and I go, do I find a way to have a drink? Notably, at this time, not alcoholic. It's too early for me right now, at least today.
Okay.
But that or being here on time, I usually try to pick on time.
I do appreciate you being on time. Thank you. Especially since I am on a timer today because your sister is flying here right now. She and Emily are on a plane. They'll get in about 3.5 hours from now. You have to be at the airport. So tick, 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 tick. I'm still reading some good things. I talk about those in the weekly channel update. So people constantly know what I'm reading these days. But what are you reading right now?
I don't think I have anything new since the last time I said what I was going to be reading, which is to say I'm in Dragonfly and Amber, the second book in the Outlander series. I'm working my way through those Chronicles of Amber books as well. Lots of Amber in my reading right now.
Yeah, Amber. You're rocking the Amber.
And, the eternal grind of I'm still on
Dead House
Gates.
Well, just like me, Toll the Hound's still on it. I read a whole bunch yesterday and got 2% further. Massive book.
I did a whole 5% back 3 weeks ago and then haven't touched it.
Okay. But what we are really here to talk about today, again, is 13 Stories. I'll put it right here. I'll add the graphic.
Right there.
13 Stories by Jonathan Sims. So we're going to start off with a Spoiler-Lite section. So if you haven't read this book yet, you're safe here right now. We'll give you a clear warning when we're diving into spoilers, because we are going to talk a little more in depth about the book. This is interesting because it's like a short story collection, but it's not really a short story collection.
It's not. It's a weird, episodic, but also not thing.
Oh, do you like my graphic? I found a building.
Yeah.
You see how many stories it has?
Did you pick the right number of stories?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Nice.
And it's kind of, out there in the not the nicest area, all kind of popping up by itself.
But it looks nice.
Yeah, it does look nice. And that was the whole idea. In this book, you've got this rich dude who builds this building in a place that nice apartment buildings, condos aren't. Okay? He demolishes this one area so he can build this special building and threw in all the bells and whistles on half of it.
But the other half is subsidized for lower income housing, which is nice. So it's not nice, but it's nice that it's cheaper.
Ritzy, well-off people will want to live in the front half of the building. And you have a doorman, a concierge, you got the whole deal. The other people, they have to come in the back.
Yeah, could we just talk about how messed up it is to be like, no. You live in the poor part of the building, you go in the back door.
And technically, it's like two different buildings then. Although not publicized, there are ways to get from the back to the front without walking around the outside. It seemed to be a very convoluted building.
I think it's a little non-Euclidean in some ways, you know? Maybe just a little.
Little Doctor Whoism going on. It's perhaps a little bigger on the inside than on the outside.
Some things connect in ways that maybe they shouldn't. But that's what happens when things get spoopy.
Now, why this rich guy, who, by the way, lives up top in the penthouse, why he would build this is part of what you're going to discover as you read the book. And you get these little vignettes all the way through that are the stories of different tenants or people otherwise related, connected to the building. And they're all connected to the greater meta story because, I mean, it's fascinating. You read the opening, like the prologue, and it's the ending.
It explains where this will end up.
And it's not a good space. It's like, ew, something bad has happened and there's a mystery around it. Now you jump back in time and all these little stories which help introduce you to and explain how all the people came to be together at what you read at the beginning.
And it's not as straightforward as just like a bunch of independent short stories and then it comes together at the end. It's like, no, as you go through, there's more hints of like, oh, maybe this is where it's pointing and this is where it's connecting. And so you feel like you're getting more of the story as you go through, but just the first one, how does this connect to anything? Because you don't have context yet.
I thought Jonathan Sims did a nice job, too, of weaving the stories together, actually. So you'll have a story about this character, but you'll have this character from 2 stories later who shows up, like does a cameo in that story, or maybe has an actual part of that story that's relevant to this person. But then later you're going to get that person's story, and you'll end up seeing the cameo
from a very different perspective.
Now, but it has a whole different relevance to that, you know, and so that weaving, he really had to take some time and think this through before writing the story. There was no way he was like thinking of these as he wrote through them. He had it all plotted out.
Everything that I've experienced from Jonathan Sims is clever and intentional, and I love it.
Clever is a really good word. I would use clever to describe this book. I would also use paranormal. I mean, it is a ghost story to an extent.
Yeah.
Perhaps I should say it is a ghost's story.
That's fair.
Yeah. It's also a story that channels the themes of dirtbagginess, comeuppance.
There's some certain like slightly anti-capitalist, if you abuse the working class, that'll come back to get you eventually kind of thing.
It was fun. I enjoyed what you get to the end, of course. The final story chapter is explaining, after you've learned all these people and how they all come together in one space, explaining how you got the result at the beginning of the story. It's like, oh, that's what happens. And it was delightful. I thought that was very entertaining.
Well, that's a word to use.
I find I use delightful in my reviews quite a bit. It's not to be taken as, and this is just how I'd want the world to be.
Look, it might not be a very palatable thing to think about, but it's delightful.
It's delightful to read and enjoy.
As a story element.
Anything else we should say about it in a spoiler-lite format? I mean, I could toss in, it goes pretty quick. This is not a long story.
No, it's not terribly long. It partially goes quickly because each of the stories themselves aren't too terribly long. And while they're interconnected, they are separate. I mean, I guess for people who are potentially interested or not, this is like well rooted in the UK.
Oh, yes.
There are some things here and there where I'm like, I don't think I got that. I think that was a reference to something or a way that they viewed something that I had to think about just because it's very a normal way of referring to something in the UK that I didn't get.
For instance, you will not find an elevator in the building. You have a lift.
And so some of those are like very common known things that are totally fine. And some of them might be lesser known. And I made an assumption. I could still be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, I didn't find that that off-putting or in any way. It just gave
No.
some flavor to the story. It does also explain the spelling of the title
Hmm.
because we're using stories as in stories of buildings, but with the British spell. Yeah. I would also toss out one other thing. Again, not very long, easy to read. I did it as an audiobook,
So did I.
and there's 4 different narrators, and that adds a lot of color to it. I enjoyed that. Jonathan Sims being one of the narrators.
I'll be honest, I didn't actually fully look. Is it only 4?
Only 4.
I thought there were more.
No, just some, can do different
A couple,
voices and
couple of
different
different
style.
people playing a couple of different characters.
And each of these stories about individual characters has its own unique flavor, very much colored by the point of view character. Because
Yes.
whenever you're doing an individual story, it's a new POV. All those POVs come into play at the end. But when you have each story with a different character's POV, Sims writes it very nicely. It has its own distinct view, perspective, and so there's a distinctness to each story.
That all said, I think is about what we can say before getting too spoilery on things.
Yes. So if you don't want anything spoiled, if you haven't read it yet, jump out now, but go pick up this book. It's worth your time. You'll definitely enjoy it. Okay, spoiler time. So, yeah, wow. I enjoyed the story. It was great. Some of the individual short stories were better than others.
Correct.
I think perhaps one of my favorites was the one with the little girl.
The little girl one was great, and I loved the context of getting to see her mom's story later. Or something. Getting to see the little girl and the context of what that is when it's not her story.
Yeah. I think one of my least favorite would be the one with the spot on the wall.
A little icky, but also just a little, not a whole lot happens.
Yeah. Well, other than the spot just keeps getting bigger and then it's on people and it's like, what? Okay.
It's been long enough because you said I read this a year. I think I read this like 2 years ago or more.
Okay.
That I'm not sure I remember all of everything perfectly, but there's just a lot of interesting, unique characters and different ways that are both paranormal, but also I think exemplify different ways of like different forms of psychosis that are how people deal with trauma and kind of scary.
Yeah. It becomes very clear fairly early that this isn't simply the story of a bunch of unbalanced people having psychic episodes. I mean, there's something going on. Psychotic episodes, by the way. Psychic episodes is what's going on.
That is they're psychic episodes.
To have so many people having so many ghost paranormal circumstances, there's something going on with this building. I mean, that's pretty clear pretty quick. Just why and how took time to get to. And of course, we get to that at the conclusion. Talk about that in a moment. I just want to talk about one of the other short stories that I most enjoyed. And it was the one, and they don't name any of these. They just name it by a number. And I don't remember
maybe the person's name kind of thing.
Yeah, numbers aren't super irrelevant, and the person's name. But I liked the other one that was about the concierge who has his friend that no one else can see, but apparently is real. That one, it plays off pretty well as, oh man, is he just not?
Is it like split personality wise? Is it like a Jekyll and Hyde situation?
And yet when we get to the end, everyone can see the guy now. He's there. He's another person at the event.
And takes action.
Takes very, very definite action. I mean, he'd taken action in the story too.
Yeah, but like we could have explained away most of those times.
I think Max was the name of the friend.
Probably.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Is there any other short story in here you want to talk about before we just talk about what was really going on and what we think of that?
I enjoyed getting the little bit of Black Mirror going on with one of them.
Okay.
I also, one of the things I liked because it highlighted the building and that weird non-Euclidean and showing, there's something wrong with the building. was the pipes. Gross story
yeah.
compared to most of the others.
Oh, man.
But
Yeah.
the pipes.
What's stuffed in those pipes? What's found in those pipes? Ugh. Yeah, agreed. So we get to the end and we find this master plan that, okay, this billionaire who funded the building and is living in the top, it's because basically he's been so corrupt his whole life, so pursuing wealth over the misery of others, that he's haunted. He's
By so many people and things.
haunted by the ghosts of those he's wronged. And he comes up with a plan to get a whole bunch of those off his back.
And basically, he's using his tenants as scapegoats for the ghosts, being like, yeah, just take these other people instead.
But dude is committed. I mean, he's got a plan and he's using capitalism to pursue this because he's basically studied a spell that he believes will work to get the ghosts off. So he allowed just the building to play itself out that these individuals were sucked into it by the spirits of the building. And then he gives them all a gift, a part of himself to show how much he values and appreciates them as they join with him in this spell.
He hosts them for dinner so that they can have him for dinner.
He literally cut off his leg and cooked it and served it. I'm like, oh my goodness.
And his spookiness is desperate and motivated by the ghosts, but it's just creepy and gross. It's not ghosts.
But then they all ate it. They were motivated to eat it for two reasons. One, he said, okay, I have this plan. Now, if you go through with this plan with me, I'm going to pay each of you a ridiculous amount of money. You'll be set. Yes, you'll have a ghost that's going to be your companion the rest of your life, but you'll be set.
And some other ghosts are easier to live with than others. A
Yes.
creepy imaginary friend who just could totally murder people, not that bad.
So the money part definitely was tempting to some of them, not so much to others. And that's where Max came in. Because if you don't want to join on, well, that big dude over there will throw you out of the building through a window. He's already done it once.
The 13th story.
Yeah, so you're enticed with wealth and threatened with death if you don't take the wealth. So, okay, they all have a little bit of Mr. Rich Dude bacon. Mm. And then the shoe drops that's not quite enough. Now, this guy you all have to kill. And that's where it stops. And it stops with that in the sense that some are like, okay, one more thing, I guess, maybe. But most of them are like, no.
Yeah,
We're
some are
not going
down,
that far.
most are not. And a brave few decide that they can do something else instead.
But then the twist. This was good writing, I thought. The twist of, wait a second, we're going to stand up to him, and there are some spirits who are not bound up in this ritual who can come help us. That was cool.
I don't think it ever really goes into like, what does this world look like that much for them 20 years down the line or whatever. But personally, I like to think most of them at least keep their ghosts to some extent anyways. Like whether they wanted to or not.
Well, we get an epilogue in the story.
And I don't remember
that
all the
makes
details of it.
The epilogue gives you the impression, no, all the spirits are gone.
I want some of them around though. I think it makes life more interesting for some of them. They had boring lives.
No, I thought it was a pretty satisfying ending. And in that epilogue, we get the sense there's just been a little time that's passed now that
It's like
a
6
few
months
of
or
them
something.
have stayed in touch, but it's drifting looser and looser. Like they're all starting to go their own ways. Some have not wanted to stay in touch at all. They just, nope, I'm out. And there's been no connection.
They have a Facebook group that they'll post to every now and then, and sometimes they'll see something from someone that's like, I haven't heard from them in years.
Yeah. I thought it was very satisfying, the bad end that the rich dude came to.
Oh, absolutely.
Very satisfying. The way that ending played out, I did not predict it. I couldn't quite see that coming ahead of time. I loved how it played out. I like a story that's crafted well enough that you can't predict the end. And yet when the end happens, it
You
makes
can see
perfect
all
sense.
the pieces. It's still there. It's like, duh.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can't necessarily predict it.
So that was great. That was great. I also enjoyed perhaps one of the best parts at the end for me was, again, the little girl
Mm-hmm.
who's got her little ghost friend who her
Mm-hmm.
mom has been sure doesn't exist and can see her now
Mm-hmm.
and loses her crap. That was
Yeah.
beautiful. That was beautiful. I told you, Mom, she's been here all along.
Been here the whole time.
So we do recommend this story. And if you guys are listening to this now, you probably recommend it too because you read it.
You've
And that's why you
probably
came
read
to
it,
the
or
front
you
of it.
just really wanted to spoil the entire thing, which does take a little bit from you, and I'm sorry.
I don't understand you if you're that type of person. Why? Why? No, don't do that.
I can say I am very happy you had a satisfactory experience with this book. It was definitely something a little bit out of my normal, especially to recommend to you, but I really, really enjoyed it. Love the author and what they do. So I just thought, I was like, if I'm going to give you a weird pick, this one, do it.
Now, this one's right in my wheelhouse. I don't read as much paranormal and horror these days, but I have read plenty in the past. So this was very comfortable for me. This kind of story I would enjoy. Yeah. It was also low commitment, not
Yeah.
very long. So I could just jump in, jump out. All good. Any last words on it, or is that your last word?
I think we're good.
All right. So we'll leave you there, everybody. Again, don't forget, like, subscribe, and leave us your comments. If you've read the story, we'd love to know, what did you think? Which of these particular vignettes were your favorite? Do you agree with ours, or were there others that really jumped out for you? And was there any particular gross factor for you, like Zach and the pipes?
The icky.
Or Rich Man Bacon? Anything else that you'd go, oh, feel free to share. It's always fun to talk about good books. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you next time.